from this day to that, for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
We are going to dive into the whole Clinton email FBI investigation, and there is a lot to discuss when it comes to this, much of which you have probably discussed with friends, family, other people, and you've heard quite a bit about it. So we will be diving into that. I do want to get into some other developments that actually came out of the UK, because the UK just had a report come out, the Chilcot report, and what it did, it exposed lies, Iraq war lies that many people already knew for the most part. And what this kind of does is it cements it into the history books that this is what happened. And that's important because, you know, they would just call you conspiracy theory unless there's some official report. And we've known that the Iraq war was BS from a lot of us from the beginning. We know all the false claims that came out to justify us going in, which it wasn't justification because they were lies. Well, they were false. I have a Ron Paul Liberty report I want to go ahead and cover real quick, and then we will get into that, and then we'll spend quite a bit of time covering this whole FBI investigation and the Clinton email scandal that's going on. But I did want to cover this because, well, we still have some sort of military presence within Afghanistan, Iraq, and all over the Middle East. And why? And I know I have another one I'm going to cover here. Obama came out with the announcement, and I'll cover that after this Ron Paul Liberty report. UK's Chilcot report exposes Iraq war lies.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good to see you, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. There is a report released just within the last 24 hours a British report. It has to do with an investigation that's been going on for 7 years, and it was asked for by a Labor Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, and they have just finished it, and it's called the Chilcot report, and it was released. And, you know, it exposes the lies, and I guess, should we be surprised? I mean, I'm not surprised, but at least it's official. I mean, Chilcot is a respected individual.
Yes.
And he spent a lot of time on it and didn't really pull too many punches and doesn't make Tony Blair look like any hero. So we've talked a lot about the war, but it's interesting that they're catching up. Of course, I think the most important thing that I get from this report is they now admit to the information that even back in 2003 was available to somebody who really wanted to look and make the case for not going to war. And there were quite a few individuals making that case. And yet now, this many years later, they're finally coming up. So it's pretty hard, to come to the conclusion that something good has come of this. But I would guess the only thing that might be good to come of this, it would just wise up people as to how governments lie their people into wars.
And unfortunately, it doesn't change. We just talked about it on yesterday's show, how General Breedlove was trying to do a very similar thing, falsifying tanks here and this and that. So unfortunately, without justice, there's no disincentive to do it. But, this is an exhaustive report. It took 7 years to compile. It's composed of several million words of written text. Just the summary was 140-some pages. So it's an exhaustive report, and I think it's slightly less satisfying to people who would like to see some more accountability on the part of Tony Blair. He's not going to be prosecuted, doesn't look like, in the UK for what he's done. However, as you point out, it lays bare the main fact. I think the main takeaway is this was a war of choice. I think that's, if you can boil it down to one line.
And this brings back memories and recollection of an individual who did stand firm in the British Parliament, Robin Cook.
Yes.
And they took the vote. They decided to go to war. And he resigned his seat in the Parliament over the outrage of this. So he obviously had good common sense or didn't believe what the government was telling him. And he was absolutely right. But, these people were soon forgotten, but they're to me really the heroes who are willing to stand up and look at it and stand against the flow, because the momentum, you get Tony Blair and George Bush saying the world is coming to end, weapons of mass destruction. He poisoned his own people, none of which was true. Yeah. And the people get all riled up. But like you say, Breedlove has done it recently, but it's done everywhere. The whole thing right now in Syria is all built on an exaggeration. Maybe they are not all lies, but exaggerations, of the great danger of Assad. So.
But I think, this whole idea of the war of choice, they said the military action was not the last resort. There was no imminent threat. That's from the report. And a war of choice is really, by definition, a war crime. You're not being threatened. You're not in any way threatened by Saddam, yet you choose to go to war. They also found that it undermined the UN Security Council. They knew they couldn't get a Security Council vote because the French were against it. Turns out they were right at the time. They went against that. The WMD's threat was, quote, presented with a certainty that was not justified. And there were a couple of other things. There was no post-war planning. They believed their lies, that we'll be greeted with flowers and they'll sing songs about us and all this sort of thing. So.
Well, the report verifies the fact that Blair was totally misleading to the House of Commons. Yeah. The intelligence reports, we know, and talked about how they doctored up the intelligence report. They weren't really intelligence reports. But I think one thing is fascinating in this report that just came out is there's evidence that there were people in security, people that were in Blair's administration that warned them, do you know that this is going to probably increase terrorism against the British and American? And that was a fair warning, and it was totally ignored. But that has, of course, been said by others because it's natural, it's common sense. But they'll do anything to get their war that they want. And that is the big problem, why we have our big job cut out for us, is to overcome all the propaganda.
Yeah, I was going to mention earlier when you pointed out about Robin Cook, but look at the contrast between the two gentlemen. Cook resigned on the basis of his deeply held beliefs that this was a cook-up, and he's gone on to he's gone on to be relatively unknown. And look at Tony Blair, who did this horrible thing, and now he's made millions, tens of millions of dollars. He's enormously wealthy and respected by many. So there is a price to pay if you stand up for principles.
Then the scare tactics, they did it in the Persian Gulf War. They did it in the Iraq War. They did it with Afghanistan. They're continually doing it today, about how terrible things are in Afghanistan. But in one sense, they're talking about bringing troops home from Afghanistan. In the other sense, this Taliban is stronger than ever before. Stronger, matter of fact, they essentially didn't exist to much of a degree before we went in there, after 9/11. So.
It's one of the things that, Blair has come back. He's come out punching again. He's in a corner. This report has put him in a corner, and he gave a very long statement earlier today, and it was really interesting to watch all of his justifications, and it shows that he really hasn't learned much, even though he's pretending to be chastened by the report. He's certainly not. He said he's relieved that there was no finding that the intelligence was falsified. But, that wasn't the point. Nobody was saying that they were writing phony reports about the WMDs. It was how it's manipulated, particularly by Blair and the people who are around him. The report didn't need to be falsified. It was manipulated and changed around to mean something that it didn't mean.
And, there was, talk at the time on occasion about the just war theory, that you can go through certain steps. And one was, has everything been tried?
Yeah.
And the report essentially said, no, they essentially didn't do anything. Remember how rush Bush was? And Saddam was trying to say, well, yes, I'll talk. No, let's hurry up and start this war. And then under the just war theory, it's also supposed to be proportional, to the attacks. Well, they say, just look at what he was doing to his people. But look at what we did to their people, and it's estimated that over 1 million Iraqis died over this, and many millions were injured and starved and all these things. And it to me was just such an utter tragedy. But what they do to all of us who were objecting to this, they say, a Saddam Hussein lover. You love him?
Yeah.
Well, first, I love the defense of this country and the legal and the law, and it was illegal. It was based on lies, and so that's one thing. But the whole thing is their idea of contriving up all this, harm and danger, weapons of mass destruction. It makes things that much worse. And how could anybody argue that the world is better off since we've invaded and occupied so many countries in the Middle East in the last 15 years?
Well, Blair is so brazen that he would do just that. And as a matter of fact, here's one thing he said today, and I know you'll get a kick out of this. It's unbelievable how brazen he is. He said, he was justifying the attack. Well, Saddam was capable of unpredictable, catastrophic actions, kind of like the U.S. invasion.
Yeah. So, anybody's capable of it, but I would think that our actions were, a lot more detrimental. But people resent the idea that to go to war is patriotic. To fight a war, support the country. And I heard it. I was on the receiving end of this. And even today, as a consequence of this, they want to qualify even those who objected to the war. But we have to really put on high pedestals, give high praise to those individuals who fought for our liberties. In this case, it was the British, and they use this all the time. They fight for our liberties. They fight for our Constitution. How do they fight for our Constitution when they go to war unconstitutionally? And this, to me, is a real shame. But it's tragic. And they say, well, that means you have no empathy, no sympathy at all for these people who sacrifice. Yeah, probably a lot more than they have, because I'm not going to lie to them. But they're the victims. they're victims. They're not international heroes, and they haven't preserved our freedoms, and they haven't preserved our Constitution. But they are victims of the American people who have been too complacent, and the British people way too complacent to allow guys like Bush and Blair to get together and decide, well, we're going to have a war because there's a bad guy over there. And who knows exactly what's deep down in their minds, It's sort of hard for me to think that Blair, it's all about the oil. But who knows? Maybe he was in the oil business too, But that to me is so sad, because I think there's a big difference between using these individuals who died and were wounded as the pawns for trying to elicit patriotism and loyalty to your government. At the same time, they're the victims of bad government, bad policies, and people who do things either out of total ignorance or out of evil motivations. And unless this message gets out, it's going to continue. Wars have been going on for a long time. Of course, in the Swords into Plowshares, I try to make the case, why does it have to continue to go on? Why can't we introduce this whole notion that it doesn't have to go on forever and ever? Yes, they've been going on for a long time, but there have been some episodes in history where there's been less war than others. But I actually think it's capable that mankind can evolve in a positive way. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not being naive. But there's no reason in the world why we can't think with education and understanding that is available to people now, that you would have more Gordon Browns who would stand on principle and stand up to his government and say, you guys are really messing things up. This is the wrong thing to do. And, of course, we have the heroic changes in attitude from Walter Jones, who saw that and said, no, this was wrong, and has now, become anti-war. I think people can change, and I think the availability of information is much more so than ever before.
Yeah, and as unsatisfying as this report may be in some ways, meaning that the people who really did this, responsible for all these lost lives, probably not be brought to classic justice. At the same time, we talked about this before. Well, where's our Chilcot report? Why don't we get one here in the U.S. where they look in all the neocon lies used to justify the war, from Bush and Cheney on down to all of the think tanks? Why don't we have our own commission like this that would do it?
Well, I'll tell you why. My opinion, of course. Maybe the British have a little bit more division between their party system, and they're not so locked in on one policy. But that's probably a relative term. But in this country, do you think that a person like Hillary Clinton, if she were to become president, she would say, that Bush was a bad guy. He was starting these wars. And I think the Republicans have been terrible because they were wanting to go into Libya and things like this. Yeah. And yet she was, as much part of it. She was probably more hawkish than a lot of Republicans were. Yeah. So she's not going to do it, because they both believe in the war. This has always been separated, from if they argue about Syria or Benghazi or any of these things, becomes political infighting. Mm-hmm. And it's a total distraction from the real issue. Why are we there? Why were we in Libya for this catastrophe? And why are we in Iraq when even then Blair was being advised, this could end up with a lot more terrorism. People are going to resent this. Common sense should tell this to people, and yet too many have bought into this thing of American exceptionalism, and we've talked about that. There's ways to be exceptional, and there's ways not to be exceptional, but you can't be spreading exceptionalism with guns and bombs and missiles and intimidation. And that is what has happened. So anything we do for some people is, noble and courageous and patriotic, and we do it in the name of liberty, and we do it to preserve our Constitution. That is so removed from reality.
Yeah, absolutely. The neocons, it's fun to watch them in a way, because, they have been on their back heels today because of this report. And essentially their argument is boiled down to, Well, Syria is the example of what would have happened in Iraq if we hadn't gone in and taken out Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
You know, and Blair essentially said that. He said if we hadn't removed Saddam in 2003, people would have risen up against him in 2011, and they would have been suppressed as brutally as Assad suppressed people in Syria.
Yeah, well, who knows what would have happened?
Yeah.
Maybe the locals would have taken care of it. Maybe even a regional government could take care of it. But that would be that's quite a bit different. When you look at our legal rights to go in there, where does the authority come from? But if they don't even want to look at the legality of it in our Constitution, what about the practicality of it? How many dollars were spent? How many people are still suffering? How many people are committing suicide over these wars that have gone on over there? I mean, and what kind of stability do they have? I mean, it's horrendous. And, at this very moment, this past week, I mean, there's more people killed, in Baghdad than, in years. And anybody who thinks, the president now is talking about, bringing a few more troops home from Afghanistan at the same time, like we mentioned yesterday, that the Afghans want $5 billion a year for 5 years to take care of their problems. And that's not going to help the people in any way whatsoever.
Go to Swiss bank accounts. I know we're getting tight on time, but if you don't mind, if we could actually find this one clip, because I think it's just worth mentioning. This is the other neocon reaction when it's shown what a disaster it is. It's all the Iraqis' fault. I don't know if we have that clip here. Here's David Frum, who was the big cheerleader for the war. The U.S.-UK intervention offered Iraq a better future. Whatever the West mistakes, the sectarian war was a choice the Iraqis made for themselves. Wasn't our fault. We had the best of intentions.
Yeah. The way things were kept in relative peace, the Assads and the Saddam Husseins, yes, it's sort of a little bit old school compared to some of the countries in the West that have lived more peaceably. But this whole thing that because Saddam Hussein was not perfect, therefore we want to make things much less perfect and much more dangerous and kill a lot more people. But it is so hypocritical, the foreign policy that we have, because it's not like we've been warned about Saddam Hussein. He was a bad guy and suppressing the people when he would theoretically may have used some gas. We were an ally of his, and we were an ally of his when we encouraged him to take on Iran in an 9-year war. And of course, we were communicating with him when we said, we don't care about the boundaries. If you think you have to go into Kuwait, we're going to have a blind eye to that. And then all of a sudden, turn the switch and say, oh no. We changed our minds, and that's more or less what we've done with Assad too. It's utterly amazing. And then after the Cold War ended, we were half decent with the Russians, and we did commercial adventures. I thought this was great. The West was dealing, and they still do, and maybe that still will help. But all of a sudden, over Ukraine, there was a switch turned on, and we've talked so much about Ukraine. Okay, now we hate the Russians. We have to put more missiles on their borders, and literally individuals would breed love, breed love, like we talked about. He'd love to have seen things stir it up. And then you have to stop and wonder about why this comes on. Of course, it has been said it is all about oil. That's why we're in the Middle East. And others will say, including myself at least, that it's about war profits and the military-industrial complex. It has to do with a lot of different sentiments, religious sentiments, and it is the ignorance of and the willingness to not live within our law, and therefore it allows our presidents to go to war without declarations of war. We go to war under NATO banners and UN banners. We are so far removed from the restraints that the founders tried to give us in getting into wars. And that, to me, is a tragedy. But as far as I can see, there's no reason why we can't reinstate those principles. We've lived in a terrible period of time recently, but it's not like World War I, and it's not like World War II. And if we continue to do this, somebody's liable to get another World War III. And yet these problems could be solved, but we have to change our attitude, and the people have to believe in peace over illegal and unnecessary wars. That's the big issue. And it's now I think we live in an era where it's a lawless era. And whether it's what the Congress does, what the courts do, we have a Department of Injustice, and we have an executive branch that doesn't give a darn, about the Congress. They just go on. And the Congress doesn't say anything, and the people don't say anything. They get angry. And right now there's a lot of anger, and that's healthy. But believe me, anger itself is not enough. You have to have a substitute for this. And I believe it's available in the libertarian principle of the non-aggression principle. And that is, if you accept that, you can find the answers to just about all these problems. We can't totally change human nature, but if we change the nature of government to prohibit the government from ever initiating force against somebody else in offense, the world would be a lot better off. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report. Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube and RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Go subscribe. And, he brought up, why don't we have, one of these reports in the U.S.? Well, what we've seen in the past 2 days, I think, should really point out why we are not going to see a report. Let's even go back a little farther back than that. We still haven't seen the classified 28 pages from the 9/11 report. So, do we really expect that here? I think over in Europe, with the whole Brexit, it gave confidence to it. And it really indicts both sides of the issue. And it's like, oh, they're not falsifying. Well, that's kind of arbitrary to the fact that they didn't really check up on the information that they believe that they had. Basically, they relied on other people's information. Excuse me. I have a problem in my throat there for a second. No matter what you believe, even if you're one of those kind of cynical people that believe, the end justifies the means. What we see in Iraq, this is what they have ended up with. So that is the end. And the means nor the end are justified. We this dictator is a bad person. We should go in. Okay, we removed that one bad person. Now what do we got? A crap load of bad people. Because why? Well, because this wasn't a choice of that society, that civilization, that community of people. Even if they go, oh, yes, finally we'll be liberated. It wasn't their choice. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we allow our leaders to make for us, which I loosely call them leaders and loosely say they're, we let them. But in the terms of our society, again, our society, we allow it to happen by not being fed up enough to stand up against it. And I'm not talking just protests. We don't have that civil disobedience on enough of a level to, prevent them from doing evil or bad things. But the most unlogical thing that someone can do is say that they are going to free a society from their dictator, when that society is not showing a move. People go, well, you know, if you have rebel groups standing up, we should go in and help. Those people are usually not well informed people, because they don't realize, and you know, this has been documented in the past, and to think that it just magically disappeared would be idiotic. That a lot of times these little groups that start popping up to overthrow dictators or overthrow governments seem to always come back to some type of link to us funding, training, and establishing these groups for a agenda. Most you know, people that all they do is watch, you know, whatever pops on TV and that's all they know, still don't even know that Bin Laden got his rise to power because we wanted Al Qaeda. We wanted to, you know, help Al Qaeda and, you know, create Al Qaeda, however you want to put it, and help sponsor the Taliban and all that to get the Russians out of Afghanistan. A lot of times, you know, look, you know, the Russians overexpanded themselves. Even Ron Paul says it. But don't also forget to the point that, well, yeah, but those rebel groups also had U.S., you know, help in one way or another. This wasn't just being spontaneous, you know, we got all kinds of weaponry and, you know, we can fight the Soviet Union, the Russians. It just, it amazes me that, you know, there's that much, you know, disconnect from reality out there. It's even becoming more and more apparent to me, you know, as the years go by, that that disconnect is getting bigger. Because I come from an era where the older you got, the more you know, realize, the more you realize you didn't know everything. The more you realize that, you know, what you were told to believe may not be the truth, that you must question everything, that you must. And I kind of was always someone that always was a questioner. I just never took anything at face value. I just naturally had a distrust and could tell when people just either didn't know themselves and they were just saying or doing or telling someone else to say or do something because that's what's expected. And I could also tell those people that didn't want to say what, why, and where, because they kind of had that self-denial that they really wanted to believe in a fallacy. Because, you know, some people have cognitive dissonance, and some people, you know, deep down know the truth, but they purposely want to go along with the fallacy because it's easier, because you disconnect from reality. And you know, whether it be 9/11, the Iraq War, you know, all the way up to this Clinton thing, there are people that are shelling themselves into this fallacy. They will not let anything penetrate them. And you see it with the people that are just cheering Hillary right now. That believe in Hillary, even though Hillary is lied to. Well, she's only lying to the right because, you know, she needs to get in power to get our ideas across. No, she lied to you too. Did she come out and, you know, tell people? No, she lied, and lied some more. I think I had a short clip pulled up here. Excuse me. Just a little, almost 2-minute clip. Hillary versus James Comey email scandal. And this was from Reason TV. I want to play this short clip here.
I did not email any classified material to anyone. There is no classified material.
110 emails in 52 email chains have been determined by the owning agency to contain classified information at the time they were sent or received.
I provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related.
Several thousand work-related emails that were not among the group of 30,000 emails returned by Secretary Clinton.
I thought using one device would be simpler.
She also used numerous mobile devices to send and to read email.
There were no security breaches.
It is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email account.
It was my practice to communicate with State Department and other government officials on their .gov accounts.
Hostile actors gained access to the private commercial email accounts of people with whom Secretary Clinton was in regular contact from her personal account.
No doubt that we've done exactly what we should have done.
They were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
People will be able to judge for themselves.
We cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
To be clear, this is not to suggest that in similar circumstances, a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences.
Americans will find that, interesting, and I look forward to having a discussion about that.
Reason TV on YouTube, go check them out. But that just demonstrates right there, you know, it don't matter what political spectrum you're in, what philosophy spectrum you're in, to support someone that everything she said there about that email and that server, she lied. And as I'm listening to it, I tweeted out from my personal social media account on Twitter. I told, there was one part in there, if I can find it. Let me see here. Okay, I can't find I got the full clip here, but I can't find just a sectioned out part of it. I should have got that before the show, but actually I got one right here that might give it to me. This had to do with the he called it careless. He called the whole thing somewhat careless. Now, what I want to get to is, information, evidence, and what happened. Hold on, give me a second here. Okay. Okay. Now, this part I want to get to because this is important. This is what I first tweeted out about because this is something I see happen all the time that, okay, let's say a cop pulls someone over. Let's say they flick something out the window. Hey, let's say they throw a cigarette butt, like kind of flick it out the passenger window. I've had cars where, the driver's side window all of a sudden stopped working. Back in the day when you actually did flip your cigarette out the window, you would roll down passenger window and just kind of flick it out the window. Okay, what if a cop's pulling you over, you did that? He thinks it's drugs. You throw it out the window. They can't find these drugs. There's been some cases where they were charged with evidence tampering because the dash cam showed something going out the window as they were getting pulled over. Now, let's play this real quick.
It's also likely that there are other work-related emails that they did not produce to state and that we did not find elsewhere and that are now gone because they deleted all emails they did not produce to state, and the lawyers then cleaned their devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery.
Why would the lawyers delete personal emails and wipe their devices so good, which I've done this before, when I sell a computer or, trade a computer for something, to wipe it to the point that forensics, nothing can be, brought back off that machine is not just something that, bam, you can do. It just real simple. It usually takes multiple wipes to fully, secure that. Make sure that everything's off. I've got a CD made up here that you put in, but it's not just something that, bam, you put the CD in and go, doo-doo, done. It's not a movie. And he said, they deleted emails that they believed weren't work-related, and cleaned their devices thoroughly enough that forensics couldn't get anything from it, could not recover anything. I tweeted out, if you destroyed evidence, even unintentionally, you could be charged with evidence tampering. Hashtag special treatment. And then I forget where this was, but lawyer asking, did you wipe the server at some type of town hall, some type of speech event that Hillary was speaking at? All it shows is basketball court with American flag and some empty bleachers behind her. But a lawyer asked, "Did you wipe the server?" Wonder what her response was.
What, like with a cloth or something? No. Well, no. I don't know how it works digitally at all. I do not have any.
We believe our investigation has been sufficient to give us reasonable confidence there was no intentional misconduct in connection with that sorting effort.
Intentional. There was no intentional. So we're not going to bring up charges. It was pretty funny because there were some comments on Anti-Tyranny.news.com on Facebook at Anti-Tyranny News. And I did even post a little screenshot of my tweet. One response that ended up in the comments. If I get pulled over doing 55 in a 35 mile per hour zone, and I didn't see the sign, do I get a ticket? Yes, I do. And probably a lecture from the officer saying something like, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. But the FBI, not a patrol officer, the FBI goes, we don't believe there was any intentional evidence tampering, perjury. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to intentionally, make sure devices are wiped. They're not going to come out and go, yeah, we intentionally wiped out emails that potentially could have, damned her. One thing that, as I'm watching this, I went back later and watched it. And there's some body language in Comey that kind of makes me go, I think that he was saying that, we're not going to recommend a indictment. Let me play this part right here real quick.
Misconduct in connection with that sorting effort, that no charges are appropriate in this case. This is not to suggest that in similar circumstances, a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences. We did not find direct evidence that Secretary Clinton's personal email domain, in its various configurations since 2009, was hacked.
But someone else in the situation will probably get in trouble, have consequences in the future, because we're going to let Hillary get away with it. Evidence tampering, perjury, and then sending all the classified information. That alone would get any other official that had top secret clearance put in prison. They wouldn't even been done with the investigation. They would have already probably been locked up. Everything that he admits Hillary has done, unintentionally or intentionally, everything he admitted that has happened here in the email itself and in the investigation into the email, all of that would get any other official that isn't up there with the Clintons and the Bushes, would get them put in jail. You see how hard they're going after Trump? everyone knows that listens to the show, I'm not a Trump supporter. But if they went, how'd they go after Trump? If he was in a position with that and he did what she did, and then during the investigation continued to do the things that she was doing, do you think they would let him run for president? Do you think they would let him anywhere near top secret classified information again? Absolutely not. They would not. They absolutely would not. But it's okay. It's okay that Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton said, again, none of this would be acceptable. I have a clip here, and this is from Judge Janine Pirro, and I thought this was very...
You all know I think highly of Jim Comey. I worked with...
Okay. Now, I want to play this because she really kind of dives deep into this, and she's worked with, like you kind of probably just heard there, James Comey. Well, listen to what she has to say. And she's been in quite a few different positions within the judicial system. And she explains that in this. And if you want the clip, it's on her page. I also have it reposted over at Anti-Tyranny News on Facebook, antityrannynews.com on Facebook. But listen to this.
You all know I think highly of Jim Comey. I worked with him when I was a DA and he was a United States Attorney. Today, however, was a very dark day for the Department of Justice and the FBI and criminal justice at large in this nation. When Jim Comey presented facts that supported the actual indictment of Hillary Clinton and then said no reasonable person would prosecute that case defies logic. In my 35 years as a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA, I've tried hundreds of cases. I ran a major office, one of the biggest in the country, and I've impaneled grand juries, presented to grand juries. This is a case, Hillary Clinton, that cries out for presentation to a grand jury. Political appointees, including Jim Comey and Loretta Lynch, should not be making this decision. In 35 years, I've never seen the target of an investigation lie, saying she didn't send or receive classified information, which was a lie, by Jim Comey. I've never seen someone instruct an underling to not allow anyone to have access when they work in government to their emails, to take off the secure headings and send non-secure, or to actually say that there was nothing that she did was wrong and that it was all permitted. Jim Comey himself said it was extremely careless. Jim Comey himself said that foreign nations and nation states who don't have our interest in mind, like China and Russia, probably hacked into it, but he can't prove it. And now what we have is a country that doesn't believe in the system anymore. This case should have gone to a grand jury. Ordinary Americans should have heard this case. And you've got political appointees like Jim Comey, Loretta Lynch, and someone who is beneath Loretta Lynch, who's also a political appointee, making this decision, reeks of favoritism. And by the way, one day you've got Bill Clinton meeting with Loretta Lynch. The next day you've got Hillary Clinton meeting with the FBI. And then after that, you've got Hillary Clinton campaigning with the president after she says, I would consider Loretta Lynch as my attorney general. Folks, put the pieces together. It was Michelle Obama in 2008 who said, I have never been so proud of my country as I am today when her husband was nominated or something like that for president. Well, Michelle, I share your emotions, although they're just the opposite. I have never been more ashamed of my country than today.
And that was Janine Pirro. And that's something she posted on her Facebook page. And you have judges, you have lawyers, you have prosecutors, you have all kinds of people coming out going, makes no sense. Anybody else does it, we charge them. Makes absolutely no sense. How can Comey come out? He's had to have been blackmailed, or he's friends with them. And basically, what has come out is no matter what, Hillary's okay. She can get away with anything. She should be in jail. And another thing, if this was someone else, they would have never been in an opportunity to run for president. And she's been able to go campaign. And isn't it just lovely that right after this comes out, we know that her and Obama are on Air Force One flying around campaigning on your dollar. Well, why would the president and Miss Clinton go around and campaign? And I heard one Hillary cheerleader without a brain claim that, well, if you're innocent, wouldn't you just go about your life? Hell no. If I was innocent, I was being investigated, I'd be like, well, what the, is going on here? Not like she had a gag order. If she was innocent, there shouldn't have been any classified, anything that, top secret. None of that should have been on there. But, we just, it's really unbelievable what we allow to go on. That anyone could still stand with Hillary after this. It's really amazing. Really amazing. Let's see where we are. We're about at the top of the hour. Give me a second here. We're going to move on from that here in a minute, but I did want to get to one thing here. I just got to find it. Okay. I'm not finding what I was looking for. I'm sure I had it here. Darn it. Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm not finding it. Thought I had it open, but apparently I don't. Now, if we look at everything that Hillary's been involved in, and we see these people cheer on, let's cheer on some more. We are saying that everything that she does is justifiable. By saying that, what we're saying is everything everybody does is justifiable if they, given out or not properly secured, classified or top secret information. If they've tried to or did destroy evidence, committed perjury, and then you don't you have to reimburse those that you cage up before they're found guilty of any of those crimes? Everybody that's ever committed those crimes now should have some type of, ability to get paid for their life that they lost. Because Hillary's on Air Force One campaigning on your dollar, and all you want is paid back for the life you lost for doing the same stuff. Because evidently, even when it was illegal, the FBI and Loretta Lynch basically have rewritten laws. So now all of a sudden, are we not being retroactive on this? Well, then any cases in the future cannot be brought up on perjury, evidence tampering, or destroying evidence. You can mess with witnesses, classified information. I just, toss it on the table when you arrive at the restaurant and then walk away. It doesn't matter. Oh, it does matter? Oh, what? Oh, what do you mean it matters? But it didn't matter for her. Where are you hiding, Comey? And about an hour ago, I did get a update that the Clinton email investigation to be closed with no criminal charges, according to Attorney General Lynch. But don't worry, the Justice Department opens investigation into deadly Baton Rouge police shooting. Oh, and by the way, Obama also came out and said that he's keeping troops in Afghanistan till the end of the year. This gets so unbelievable that I really feel that someone needs to hurry up and pitch me before I can wake up. Because how can this be so blatant right out there in public? Yes, committed this crime, committed this crime, committed this crime, committed this crime. But we don't see anybody that would just take on this case. No reasonable prosecutor would touch a case like this. The hell are you talking about? There's lawyers all over throwing their hands up in the air. Going, what the hell? What about all these people I'm sitting here trying to, help, and they screw things up and they pay for it more and make my, job harder. But then she does it and was it her case never even goes to trial. Hey. Just unbelievable. Okay. I want to get into some other news here. Give me a second here. One thing that I've been talking about lately with people is I don't trust big pharma. I don't do medicine. I don't even like taking Tylenol, ibuprofen. I don't do it. I got all kinds of herbs around that I use and things like that. I'm not a big pharmaceutical person because the people I know that do the pharmaceuticals have to now. They're constantly sick. I think they don't have to, but if they want to continue to live their lifestyle the way they do, really unhealthy eating habits, always sick, and always having to go to the doctor and get pharmaceuticals prescribed to them. It starts off with, there's a few instances I know of that it started off with parents. Every time they get sick, they go to the doctor. That day, they get the sniffles, they're getting sick, they need to go to the doctor before they get a sinus infection. And from, early on, that's all they know how to do. They don't know, the slightest cough, the slightest sniffle, they're freaking out. And I think it's funny because I get the slightest, I have herbs here that literally by the end of the day, I don't have anything. They go get these prescriptions and it takes them, 3, 4, 5, sometimes a week to get completely over something. I usually wake up the next day perfectly fine. I'm like, I don't understand, and then they have side effects from them. Get drowsy, can't eat right, gives them a headache. It's just, I know one person that heartburn a couple times, when they're younger, go take a Tums, get heartburn a couple more. Well, I'm just getting heartburn all the time. I've had heartburn 4 times. Not looking at what they're eating, going, I got heartburn multiple times. Tums ain't going to work for me. I need to go to doctor. Pills and up in doses and going to more different types of pills, and literally I see that person probably every 2 hours have to pop a pill. Otherwise, they get heartburn. They go, well, I finally got a doctor that knows what he's talking about because he diagnosed me with this. It's like, dude, you eat pasta, you eat pizza, you eat a lot of processed tomato-based and other foods that, if that's all I ate, I'd probably have heartburn too. And now you're diagnosed with something that if you go back and look at some of the medications, and I think it's the medications that make it where you are now. Because before you were on all those medications, did a Tums work? Yeah, but I'd get it days later. Probably because you ate half a pizza. Drank a 2-liter Mountain Dew. Now you're on the pills. Now Tums literally won't do a damn thing. Well, Truth and Media has done a 4 installment on Big Pharma. I want to play one of those installments right now. The last one that's been put out. Truth and Media, how Big Pharma rakes in profits from deadly drugs. And if Ben Swan's wording it deadly, he usually knows what he's talking about. Anybody that's familiar with Ben Swan, which my normal listeners probably are. But I want to go ahead and get into this Truth and Media. It's not too long here, so.
Well, Big Pharma has learned how to game the system, getting FDA approval for dangerous, even deadly drugs, and profiting hundreds of millions of dollars. The question, where is the accountability? This story surrounds a woman by the name of Peggy Ryan. She was a rising star in the pharmaceutical sales world, and she worked for a massive company called Endo Pharmaceuticals. In 2002, she was pushed to sell a pain patch that was sold under the name Lidoderm.
Ever since I began in April of 2002, there was much pressure to promote the Lidoderm patch off-label.
So she had access to a lot of information, and she provided that to the government. But then they asked her to wear a wire and obtain audio tapes of the people that she reported to, telling her and other employees to essentially break the law.
It's hit an all-time high with Lidoderm at over 54,500 scripts.
Expand that market base for Lidoderm.
Lidoderm at an all-time high number of total prescriptions.
Part of the master scheme is that the Lidoderm patch is covered under orphan status.
But to truly understand this story, you have to understand the system by which Congress is subsidizing something called orphan drugs. See, when a drug is needed for a condition or a disease that affects only a small percentage of the population, the FDA will subsidize the creation of that drug. The idea is that the pharmaceutical companies can't really make a profit on this drug because too few people use it. So we, the taxpayers, wind up paying the drug companies to create the drug. These are called orphan drugs. In this case, Endo Pharmaceuticals created the pain patch Lidoderm. The pain patch was only approved to treat symptoms of post-herpetic neuralgia, a rare disease which is a complication of shingles. But Endo began selling that drug off-label, meaning selling Lidoderm for everything from low back pain to carpal tunnel syndrome to neuralgia. But once a drug is approved, the FDA isn't monitoring the drug for side effects. In the end, Indo Pharmaceuticals agreed to a settlement of $193 million, a massive sum. And yet not really when you consider this stunning fact. During the time that Lidoderm was sold off-label, Indo Pharmaceuticals made $1 billion on that drug. So in the end, even with a nearly $200 million settlement, Indo still made over $800 million.
We did a study that showed that this medication affects brain function.
Doug Brimner is an author, doctor, and professor at Atlanta's Emory University. Years ago, he began studying the acne drug Accutane.
Teenagers taking an acne medicine called Accutane were committing suicide. And so how did you end up becoming an expert witness? My understanding is a parent of a child contacted you and asked you to look into this. Is that right?
Well, right. I was doing research on depression in the brain, so I was working in a similar area. So the question is whether the same kind of changes that we see in the brain in depression would be seen in kids taking this medication.
Yeah.
So the idea was that if the same brain areas are affected, then that could explain why some teenagers were developing depression and even some of them killing themselves.
Turns out it was. How bad was Accutane? From 1982 to May of 2000, the FDA received hundreds of reports linking Accutane to depression, including 37 suicides, 110 hospitalizations for depression or suicidal behavior, and 284 cases of non-hospitalized depression. The drug was recalled in 11 countries. 7,000 plus lawsuits were filed against the drug maker Roche, and while some claimants received millions for damages and medical expenses, the numbers do not compare to the company's revenue from selling that deadly drug.
So in terms of like the FDA and many of these organizations that are supposed to oversee these pharmaceutical companies and these drug makers, were they failing in their role to be able to determine whether or not these drugs were dangerous?
Well, in all fairness to the FDA, they have a budget to approve drugs, and there's a lot of political pressure for them to approve as many medications as possible and as quickly as possible. But they're not giving a budget to do surveillance or to follow medication safety after the drug is out on the market.
And that's exactly what happened with Accutane. A drug that was supposed to cure acne had severe and even deadly side effects, and yet it remained on the market.
In fact, there were thousands of kids born with severe neurological birth defects. And then the issue with the suicide and depression, that took several more thousand people before that became clear as well.
Now, here's the most insane part about Accutane, because even though the drug was proven to be deadly, the FDA never shut it down. Not only that, they never declared the drug deadly. And now a generic version of Accutane is about to hit the market. So what you need to know is that in order to go to market, any drug in America must receive the FDA's approval. It's a long and, quite candidly, expensive process. But when the FDA studies only cherry-picked information, has agents who are promised future jobs with big pharmaceutical companies, and doesn't deal with a drug after it's been approved, even when that drug is causing birth defects, even death, then quite candidly, what good is the FDA in the first place? Allowing big pharma to control perceptions, outcomes, research, media, even responsibility when something goes wrong? No, big pharma does not game the system. Big pharma owns the system. And it's time that the public demands that that is no longer the case.
Ben Swan, Truth in Media. Go check him out. truthinmedia.com. Ben Swan on YouTube. Check him out again. Subscribe. One thing that isn't usually touched either, which he kind of lightly touched on it there, but it's the failure of, again, the judicial system. These companies make a large profit off this drug. Then a small, they can make billions off of a drug, but, settlement of, maybe $100 million. Then time it gets to, even a lot of people don't even do it, unless it's something major, which is probably a good thing for the people that are going along with these class action lawsuits. It helps the ones that, have more of a side effect from it or lost family from it, but they do the. You think a judicial system, if they're going to actually bring justice, then they would go, hey, you made this much of a profit. We need that much money back. We'll let you keep your operating cost to create a drug, but you didn't do proper research. Therefore, the court should say, hey, you made that much profit off of the drug, then that much profit needs to be paid back because you didn't have the right warnings, or you didn't, do proper research. Now, if it's something like a snake oil, or hey, I think this is going to help your thing, but I don't have evidence to say that it actually will. You take it at your own risk. You may die, you may not. You may become suicidal, you may not. At least that would be honest. All of this is to create illusion that things are safe so they can test them on you without your knowledge that really that's what they're doing, is testing on the populace. Because a lot of times, research might have been manipulated to not show that, 1 out of every 20 end up having death or, or major problems or something like that. Definitely after it comes out, and just let it keep running its course. Let's see if after more people start using it, if that number starts dropping where it's 1 in every million that you're testing. And a lot of people link this back to the elites wanting to find a cure for everything and live forever. Wouldn't surprise me, but I'm not going as far as say, yeah, that's it. That's what they're doing. Because I think a lot of it is money and power and control. And the FDA, again, a lot of times doesn't do their own research. They don't do their own research. They go off of what research the company has done. Biggest flaw that you could ever have. It's like telling the perpetrator to write down your story and you're just going to believe that. Then that's the truth. And it's up to other people to prove that wrong. Well, that we already do that. We don't need government for that. It's just a corrupt system all the way around, definitely when you look at it from both the FDA, the accepting of just a lot of times junk science, and then you also have it on the judicial side where, we know you made $780 billion off of this drug, but we're going to award the people that were harmed by this drug $200 million. Great. Well, let's just, every drug we make, expect about $200 million of that profit to automatically go to settlements. A lot of companies do that. Okay, where are we at on time? Okay, we are kind of getting towards the end here. If I can find this short clip, I'll get to it here. have the clip up here right now, so let me see if I can find it. Okay, I'm not seeing it, but I do have some articles up here to cover it. Let me get back to my list of articles here. And of course, all of a sudden, everything wants to move slow. Okay, here we go. Okay. Justin Amash had posted on his Facebook page. This is what he posted. This week, the U.S. House of Representatives is scheduled to vote on an atrocious bill that violates the Constitution and abandons the rule of law. H.R. 5611, the Homeland Safety and Security Act, contains a simple provision with staggering implications. It permits federal government to restrict a constitutionally secured right, the right to bear arms, based merely on what the government predicts someone will do in the future. Terrorists already can be arrested, charged, tried, and convicted under current law and denied gun rights. The real innovation of H.R. 5611 is to grant the government power to target law-abiding Americans. The bill allows the government to prohibit gun transfers to Americans who have not been charged with, let alone convicted of, any criminal or terrorist activity. Under the bill's constitutionally inadequate process, the targeted individual receives a basic hearing, not a jury trial, and the judge can restrict the individual's gun rights upon nothing more than a showing of probable cause to believe. Let me repeat that. And the judge can restrict the individual's gun rights upon nothing more than a showing of probable cause to believe that he or she will someday be a terrorist. And that's really important. Why, he made sure he worded this the way he did and how they worded it is because probable cause to believe that he or she will someday be a terrorist. What does that mean? Well, that paints a wide spectrum. That means that anybody that doesn't believe in what the government's doing then can have their gun rights taken away because they could one day become a terrorist. What is a terrorist? Well, a terrorist to the government is someone that is trying to destroy its power. A terrorist to the population is someone that just goes around terrorizing people. For most Americans, and definitely in our day of time, it seems that, well, that's basically most people. Most people feel that government might be terrorizing, whether it be law enforcement, FDA, EPA, ATF, BLM, all these alphabet agencies tend to terrorize people. You know, go harass raw milk farmers, organic places, food markets, going into bars to check IDs of people that haven't done anything wrong. Going and kicking families off land that they've ran for hundreds of years. So what terrorism actually is when they terrorize people. When a population is terrorized by either a person or a group. But the government redefines it for their purposes. For government, terrorism isn't the people that terrorize the population. For government, terrorists are the people that threaten their power. Sometimes that might be the actual terrorists. Because if a population doesn't feel safe, they might go against the government. Which is funny. Because when they do take people's gun rights, a populace might get upset when their safety is not secure anymore. But let me get on to what he put here. If successful this week, H.R. 5611 will be among the most egregious gun control measure ever to pass either House of Congress. If the bill becomes law, it will mark a massive expansion of the government's ability to restrict gun rights on the basis of pre-crime. A crime not yet committed, H.R. 5611, is the actualization of dystopian fiction. The rule of law requires notice that particular actions will result in penalties and restrictions of rights, but the bill enables a judge to penalize a constellation of legal activities that the judge believes can predict the individual's future actions. Under this standard, there is no way to be sure that you are preserving your Second Amendment secure rights. You just have to live life in a way that hopefully a judge won't someday find suspicious. Even if the government alleges that the individual has committed illegal acts, H.R. 5611 may be used unconstitutionally to short-circuit due process to restrict someone's fundamental rights based on illegal conduct. Due process requires that the individual be found guilty of the criminal act beyond a reasonable doubt. This bill requires the government only to show probable cause, a much lower burden of proof. To believe a claim that at the time of the hearing cannot be indisputably proven or disproven that the individual will commit a future act of terrorism. It's not even clear how this future behavior would be litigated. What must the individual show to convince a judge that he or she will not commit an act of terrorism? In the indefinite future, will the hearing simply devolve into a dispute about the individual's character? This would be hugely unsettling. The prosecutor and the judge would have to discuss whether the individual in front of them, perhaps a member of a religious or ethnic minority, who hasn't actually been found guilty of anything, is nonetheless just so rotten that his or her capacity to make alternative choices should be ignored. Free societies do not permit judges and prosecutors to restrict your rights just because they don't like you. And you can read the rest of what he posted there on Justin Amash on Facebook. And I also have an article here covering it from gun owners. A couple of weeks ago, Democrats made a mockery of the House by sitting on the floor, whining, and metaphorically holding their breath until they turned blue. In response, House Speaker Paul Ryan gave these petulant children exactly what they want, a vote to impose gun control. The House is expected to vote this week on anti-gun legislation, H.R. 5611, that is similar to the bills that were already voted on in the Senate. A proposal that would allow Attorney General Loretta Lynch to impose a gun ban against people who have committed no crimes, but nevertheless are on a government watch list. Of course, the Orlando shooter was not on a no-fly selectee or even consolidated watch list. He was exonerated by the FBI. He passed background checks. He bought his guns illegally in a gun store. Every single gun control law that had been put in place to stop terrorists like him failed because they never worked. But there is one thing that would have stopped him. If the Pulse nightclub had not been a gun-free zone, lives could have been saved, as evidenced by concealed carriers who successfully protected lives last year at a Youngstown, Ohio bar, and more recently at a bar in South Carolina. Of course, anti-gun Democrats ignore examples of good people using their guns to stop mass shootings, and they ignore the fact that the Orlando gunman openly admitted he was killing in support of ISIS. Not only do they ignore the terror connection, radicals like Barack Obama continue to move heaven and earth to import hundreds of embedded terrorists who simply cannot be properly vetted. Sadly, Obama has been able to enlist help from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and now House Speaker Paul Ryan to make the recent Orlando tragedy about guns rather than about growing terror threat within our borders. Obviously, this is not about guns, but making it so only energizes Hillary's political purpose going into election. Make no mistake about it, none of the gun control proposals that will be voted on this week are constitutional, and while they are aimed at stopping gun purchases, thus restricting Second Amendment rights, none of them are aimed at stopping potential terrorists who buy a truckload of fertilizer, as in Oklahoma City, if you believe it, or box cutters, as on 9/11, if you believe it. Republicans twisting arms to pass gun control light. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, is the sponsor of the gun control package that will be voted on this week, H.R. 5611. And according to press reports, the NRA supports this legislation. Again, why I like Gun Owners of America, GOA, gunowners.org. Check them out, subscribe, join. NRA always caves in. If it was up to NRA, everybody just have a little lever action Winchester. I really believe that too. Bunch of rich people with their guns that they all have Henrys and lever actions and fancy looking guns. And I'm talking about more of the deep embedded people. What this means is that most Republicans are going to support this gun control light bill, even though most Democrats oppose it because they don't think it goes far enough. This means there is a possibility that the anti-gun legislation can be defeated If the truly pro-gun Republicans who vote no on all gun control are joined by the anti-gun Democrats who will vote against it because they want stricter gun control. But you can be sure about this. The virulently anti-gun crowd only cares about demonizing guns and your Second Amendment rights. Remember, or they don't care that all the proposals on the table, including H.R. 5611, would allow Loretta Lynch to impose a gun ban against people who have never committed a crime based on subjective standards. Remember that the Justice Department has already found that gun owners in general pose a high risk of domestic terrorism. Yeah, that came from the Justice Department. They found that, the right wingers and gun owners and veterans. Just look at the MIAC report. That's in our documents and downloads vault on anti-tyrannynews.com. There's a link right to the MIAC report. Go check it out. Due process only for the rich. Republicans who support this bill claim there is language that purports to give due process, but the procedures which supposedly grant due process in this Orwellian legislation are jokes. We all know from the Veteran Disarmament Act that the government can use the full weight of its taxpayer-financed bureaucracy to take away people's guns, as has happened to more than 250,000 veterans. And so when the government goes after your gun rights, if you can't come up with tens of thousands of dollars up front that will be required to defend yourself, and you have no taxpayer financed lawyers, unlike most criminal defendants, you're going to lose your guns, period. Hence, the due process that McCarthy bill purports to give is only for the wealthy, for those who can afford an OJ defense. Not only that, under judicial precedent, Attorney General Lynch could deem all of the information relevant to the case as classified, meaning that your lawsuit would be like a fighting with a blindfold, and most of the important meetings would be in camera between the judge and the Justice Department. So you'll not only be going up against the immense wealth of the U.S. government, you will be fighting blindfolded as well. This is not a pro-Second Amendment bill, and the passage of this legislation or any gun control will allow the anti-gun Bloomberg crowd to put points on the board. This is true even if insatiable Democrats pretend it's not enough. Any gun control will concede Obama's argument that guns are the problem. And it will position the anti-gun left for its next set of gun control demands. So, probably might want to call your representative. Probably would be a good idea. The Libertarian Republic's also got an article about Justin Amash warning about the gun control bill, Republican gun control bill. And I thought this was funny because Thomas Massey also posted something. And he wrote it on a Post-it note or something, or no, actually I think that was a envelope. I wrote it on and then posted a picture But in the description, you put a $7 billion foreign aid bill almost passed on a voice vote tonight with fewer than a dozen members present. But I was there at 9:30 p.m. to demand a recorded vote. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we will have that recorded vote, and he posted this 21 hours ago, on the Global Food Security Act, which would be more appropriately named the Global Food Stamp Act. I know the folks who wrote this bill generally want to influence governments and feed the poor in other countries. But how can we keep spending money in other countries when we have so much debt and so many needs in ours? Now, if you want to check up on some articles and clips about Clinton and everything, don't forget to go to our Facebook page on at Anti-Tyranny News. Now, if I can find this real short clip, I'll play it before the end of the broadcast. But my browser's acting all slow, so for it to load, it's going to have to happen kind of quick. Try and knock down some of these clips here. Come on, load. Okay. This is something that We Are Change put out a week ago, but I really do think that this is something that we need to be very careful for, because I think we're getting to this pivot point, and I've talked about this pivot point before. This pivot point we're getting to is a point where the FBI, Comey, can come out and basically say she's guilty of all the charges. We're not going to recommend a charge. You know Loretta Lynch ain't going to charge her. So we're telling you, she's guilty. We're not going to do anything about it. Slap to the face of every American. Well, what's going on? Well, maybe We Are Change has a little say about this and why it could be happening. Maybe not this case, but what's going on right now. And this has to do with some of the global elites.
Oh boy, the bankers, social planners, globalists, and elites are pissed off with one of their lackeys, James Traub, coming out in a scathing article calling you right now, sitting in front of this computer, watching this video, calling you the fist-shaking, mindless, angry, ignorant, know-nothing masses, and how we, as the elites, need to rise up and take over. These are his exact quotes, exact words that he used to describe the current political landscape unfolding right in front of us. James Traub is an elitist snob that comes from the Bloomingdale Empire. That's where his family had all of his wealth from. He is an affluent, pinky rising, tea drinking, unbehensed, unknowing, ignorant snob on his high horse, who is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's important that we go over the very fact of his relationship with the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations, which many people do not know about publicly, is actually an organization private organization with 4,300 members and has senior serving politicians, more than a dozen current and former secretaries of state, national security officers, bankers, lawyers, professors, CIA members, and senior media figures a part of its organizations that mostly hold its meetings in private. They are the upper echelons. They are the establishment outer circle of the current political system that we have. In their own article, in their own words, Richard Gardner, CFR member, in their own publications wrote, the CFR publication, the New World Order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. But in the end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. The CFR even writes open publications calling for the end of nationalism, calling for the expansion of globalization, calling for the world's elites to pretty much have control of every echelon of our human life. These are corporate globalists who obviously have a lot of power, have a lot of affluenza, and run things behind the scenes. And of course, no surprise, James Traub is also a very staunch Hillary Clinton supporter, calling her tougher than you thought, also tenderer and wiser. In his foreign policy writings, he writes for foreign policy. And of course, this is no surprise because Hillary Clinton is the female dog to the Council on Foreign Relations, even herself saying,
we'll get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have this far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we...
Yeah, well, what you should be doing, what your affluent overlords, elites, will tell you to do. And you admitted it in your own words. Now, in this article that just came out a few moments ago, James Traub, he writes that today's citizens' revolt in the United States, in Britain, in Europe, are a cause of extremism, and they're going to upend politics as we know it. And it's going to be something that we have never seen in our lifetime. This is horrible, what's happening right now in Sweden, in Austria, in Poland, in France, in the United States with the rise of Donald Trump, and of course the Brexit vote that just took place a couple of days ago. And he equates this kind of values, this kind of traditional, this kind of nationalism as extremism, and that this extremism has gone too far, it has gone mainstream. It is so brazen and it is so in our face that the Brexit vote, which ended free trade zones, which ended this huge bloated bureaucracy, which ended all these rules and regulations and laws that were hurting human life in the United Kingdom. He says that this is just unbelievable. I can't believe there is utter retribution on the bankers, on the economists. Well, if you talk to anybody who is a regular person who actually knows what life is about, who actually lives a normal life, not in his ivory tower, not an affluent billionaire and millionaire, people were pissed off at the banksters. Of course, they engineered the housing market crash in 2008 and then created a banker bailout system where they took money from the people after they just kicked them out of their own homes. He even admits, is this elitist, what I'm saying? Maybe. Of course it is. Of course it is, because you have no object view of reality at all. But it's interesting that you have the brazenness to even open your mouth as you did here, showing you how the elites, you and all these other CFR, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg, and all these other members, the elitists, the rich snobs, showing you the point of view of what you really think of human society, of what you really think of the masses, insulting us as you call to rule over us. These are the people who are running the things behind the scenes. Wake up, people. Share this video and support us on Patreon to keep this organization fully independent, fully sustainable for you and by you. We have been able to do all this work because of your long-term support on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/wearechange. Just $1 a month keeps our operation running. Subscribe, We're going to be covering these elitist, affluent, ivory tower limo driving liberals, Hillary Clinton supporting secret society, butt sniffing, brown nosing snobs here on this YouTube channel. Subscribe.
We Are Change on YouTube, wearechange.org. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, are we at that tipping point? I think if we're not there, we're closer than we've ever been. Maybe we're losing steam getting up that hill, which we've seen with the Brexit. Or maybe they're just restructuring and getting ready to go over the edge, to go towards that globalism. You got the TPA, which is the new name for the TPP, or, Trans-Pacific, Partnership, or, whatever they're calling it now. And we have gun control being pushed hardcore right now, which they want to also make part of the, TPP, TPA, whatever. To trade with other countries, you basically have to sign on with that, which makes it basically a treaty. But they're not going to call it a treaty, therefore they don't actually have to go through the legal process, which really they do, but they rather commit treason. We know this. It seems like government officials commit treason out in the public and don't care. That's why I'm saying we have to be approaching that tipping point here soon. I hope not, but it just seems like we're on that path. I hope we never get to that point, and I hope we never have to go through some violent revolution. I want things to be peaceful. I want to be left alone. I want to be able to live my life and have my natural rights where I have my right to self-defense. You don't get to restrict based on your fears and your ideology and, your empathy. That doesn't give you a right over my life. I want everybody to go check out UCY.tv. There's a support tab at the top. You can donate and help keep this network going. Also, if you scroll down towards the bottom, there's an Amazon button. If you click the Amazon button, same great deals, same great prices, and UCY gets a little kickback from it to help cover operating costs. Also, don't forget to check out My Patriot Supply. If you go to antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot, it'll take you right to My Patriot Supply. Same great deals, same great prices. Again, great seed vaults for non-GMO seeds. And at the same time, Anti-Tyranny News gets a little kickback from that to help cover operating costs here on our end. So again, antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot. And UCY.tv.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.